Hello everybody, welcome to my channel. Thanks for clicking on this video. Today we're going to be taking on the project. We're installing a gutter and a downspout. Can you see that going all the way down? Beautiful job. This is the pre-shot. I've got the end of a screened-in porch here with no gutter installed. And I originally thought it was a good idea to not install one because I wanted that drain, that water runoff, to actually irrigate our garden and our sunflowers that we have below. But it actually is creating too much moisture, so I'm going to go ahead and install a gutter running about 17 feet in length. So this is kind of the shot before. Water was just dripping right off of there. We'll go ahead and get started. So the supplies that we need, I actually went to the store and bought. I'll put everything down below, the full list and everything with some recommendations if you want to check that out in the description. But I'm going with vinyl as opposed to aluminum because it's cheaper, it's easier to work with, and I just like the look of it a little better. It's kind of a nice, clean vinyl white color, and it's going to match the outside really well. So I'll show you around everything that you need to know in terms of supplies and whatnot. We'll actually get a look at that, but we're going to get the ladder up here. If you are working on a ladder, of course, be really safe, really careful, have somebody hold that or whatnot. And keep in mind, I am not a professional. I'm just a DIYer, so take all this with a grain of salt. This is not a professional install job. Here we have the gutter itself, and we've got the downspout, we've got the drop outlet, we've got some hangers here, coupler for the gutter, and some end caps for the gutter. Got a couple downspout brackets as well, and a couple of looks like 45-degree transitions with the drop outlet. And I've also picked up some seam sealer. We're going to be sealing some of this stuff up with some screws, a level, drill, and pretty much that's all we need. Now this is all considered the same system. I think it's called the U-Snap or something like that. Again, I got this at the local hardware store. And the idea is that the gutter kind of, once those hangers are up, the gutter can actually snap, right? U-Snap, get it? How clever, right? Actually snaps into place. Now, it's easier said than done. You need two hands to do this for the most part, and you want to be really, really careful once we get this up. We don't want to actually bend the vinyl and have it break and snap, right? So there's a soft spot, and I have some tips and tricks to show you here, but this is just kind of how it works before we get it all up on the ladder. And you need to know what we're doing, right? What we're doing here. So there's the end cap, and that's kind of what it's going to look like installed. And the gutter will actually slide back and forth on the hanger. You can certainly seal that down, but vinyl does expand and contract, so I'm not going to seal the gutter to the actual hanger at all. It's just going to sit in there, and that way it'll be able to you know, in freezing and hot weather, it can contract and expand as it needs to. So what I'm doing is marking just to kind of get an idea of how many hangers or brackets I need to install. I am going to be installing these about every 2 feet. If I feel pretty comfortable with that. I did some poking around online, and these things basically fail if you put the brackets too far apart, right? More brackets, the better. So don't skimp on the brackets. You could probably be ultra conservative and do every 1.5 feet or so, but I'm going to try every 2 feet and see how that goes down. And I am going to need 2 of these big sections. So I've got 2 10-foot sections, and I'm going to be installing a coupler here. And I will cement this piece down because there's a gap that I don't want water running through. We'll do that in a later step. Again, I'm just dry fitting everything together on the ground before I get it up there, and just making some general marks about where I want my brackets and hangers to be. And they can deviate a little bit at this point. It doesn't have to be exact. This is just, again, a general measurement. And I have laid everything out in front of the install location. So in front of that porch, screened in porch. And I'm kind of looking up and kind of determining, okay, where do things need to be, right? Now I'll actually get up there on the ladder and make more accurate marks, and they may or may not line up with the marks that we made on the gutter. Now this drop piece, it's going to go about right here, all the way up, obviously, but I want it to run down that beam. And we're not supposed to glue that piece in, by the way. There's a sticker on there saying don't glue it. So anyway, we'll get up here on the ladder, and you can see we'll start with the very left side. Now I could install the hanger all the way close to the shingle, but I don't need to go that high. I do want to get a little bit of drip actually, because I'm dealing with some irrigation. I want a little bit of water to actually hit the garden as it drips down, right, as it rains. So what I'm going to do is start with the very left, and I'm going to make my marks for my hangers about every 2 feet. Now, really importantly, you need to have enough slope as your gutter runs from left to right. There's an exact measurement. You can Google it. How much slope do I need? But I want it to basically drop 1.5 to 2 inches from the very left side of my install site to all the way to the other end. So 17 feet to the right. It needs to have a total of about 1.5 to 2 inch drop. That's what I'm doing anyway. And I really recommend you be more aggressive on your slope if you can be, as opposed to more conservative, because you don't want to get all these hangers up and then figure out you don't have enough slope and your water's not draining out your gutter appropriately. You don't want sitting water in there. So do your math and make your marks accordingly. Now you can see I'm pre-drilling my holes for the hangers here because I'm drilling through a layer of metal. And it does slip initially, so I recommend taking kind of the end of your drill, putting the drill tip on the end on the metal itself, and then kind of giving it a firm hit on the back of the drill just to seat the pilot hole a little bit more, and then start to drill, and that will prevent slipping. Now I do have some 100% silicone. I recommend applying that on your screws and in your screw holes, because you don't, of course, want water coming in those holes at all. So seal them up well. And there are 2 screws per hanger that I'm dealing with these plastic hangers. Now you might be asking, are they strong enough, right? Well, again, it depends on how much weight they carry. So the more hangers you have, the better you'll be, and the stronger the piece will be. If you space them out every 6 feet, they're probably going to be quite weak, and they'll fail on you right in the middle of the winter or something, or whenever there's a lot of rain, or over X amount of time. So I recommend, again, not skimping on the brackets. I'm doing these every 2 feet or so. Now, if you're dealing with this U-snap system, be careful. You don't want your screw head to be too thick, where when it's installed and sunk all the way in, there's not enough clearance from when you snap in the vinyl gutter in that clip. So I actually had to go down to a thinner screw head. So I'm using wood deck screws basically, and that's going to work really well. And again, this is me measuring the slope from bracket to bracket, and you do want enough slope. Let's time lapse this puppy a little bit. I'm installing all of the brackets, all of these hangers right here, and things are moving along pretty nicely. Again, make sure you have enough drop for each one. That could look like 1/8 of an inch. It could be 1/4 of an inch. Depends on how long the run is, right? All right, so we're ready to kind of get the gutter up here. So we'll take the first section. This is a 10-foot section, uncut. So factory cut ends, which is really nice. Pay attention to that. For example, if you end up having to cut this yourself, you don't want, if it's not an exact cut, you don't want that to be the end piece where your end cap goes on, and thus having a possible hole. So what we're doing, we can slide the gutter in to the bracket on the side furthest away from me, and then with 2 hands you can secure that and kind of snap it into place. You can also slide them in. So if you take the entire gutter piece and kind of slide them through the 2 securing points for each bracket, that would work really well too. Because again, your gutter can move back and forth. Can you see that? It's like sliding back and forth. So it doesn't actually, and that's an advantage. You can use that to your advantage. So you can install a coupler, which is what I'm doing right here. Because remember, my entire run is about 17 feet, and I've got 10-foot lengths of this gutter. So I need to use this coupling piece, and it slides on like that. And I'm dry fitting everything first. I'm not going to be doing any seam sealant yet. That'll be one of my final steps here once I'm happy with everything. Make sure it all lines up correctly. Of course, if you are confident that your coupler is in place, you can go ahead and apply your sealant. I am actually doing that on the first because no matter what, I know I need this coupler. So I'm going to go ahead and apply sealant liberally to this side only. And I'll let that slide into place and dry. And I'm going to make sure that's about halfway so it provides adequate support. And I'll put a bracket right next to that too, so it's a little extra secure. And you can kind of wipe down that seam sealant stuff so it's a nice smooth surface. Okay, so that's what this looks like, and I'm actually going to secure that piece to the house just like that. And we got a little bit of rain, so I'm actually going to have to hold off on the project for a minute. But you can see that my first 10-foot section is actually draining water pretty well. It's not torrential downpouring, but you can see it's angled correctly. That's a pretty steady flow, so my slope seems to be good. So we'll wait for that rain to stop and then get back up here. Now you should not apply that seam sealant in wet conditions. It'll be a hot mess for you, I promise. I tried it. So wait for everything to dry before you apply seam sealant. Okay, so this is the drop piece that we're going to be working with. I'm back down on the ground and I'm dry fitting things. This is my second 10-foot piece, and I'm going to have to make a cut on the actual 10-foot piece of gutter because I don't need that extra 3 feet. Remember, I'm dealing with 17 feet in length. There's my coupler, so it's going to go right there. And let me measure that. And I'll get my end bracket on the right on as well. And I have them a couple of inches away from the side of the house. Okay, so I have my marks. I know exactly how long I want my gutter piece to be. And I also know where I want my drop outlet to drop down at. So you're going to have to measure a couple of times. Measure 3 times and cut once, right? Otherwise you're going to be going to the store and buying a new piece if you mess this up. So you can certainly use a hacksaw. That's what I'm doing for this gutter. Now the downspout I'll actually bring over to my miter saw. You could also use, it doesn't have to be a perfect cut unless it's joining to a factory cut edge, right? And I'll show you what I mean in just a minute. But for now, I'm going to be cutting this piece using my Dremel tool with glasses, of course. This is a pretty effective way to cut the gutter piece. But it's not super strong. I didn't put it under my miter saw because I just wasn't convinced that the integrity of it would hold. I didn't want anything bending as it was cutting. So I'm just using my Dremel tool and filing this down. You can certainly Google how do you cut vinyl gutter, but this is what worked for me. So now again, later my downspout, I'll be putting that under my miter saw. So I've got my long gutter cut to length, got a factory cut end and kind of a DIY cut end, if you will. And next I'm just making sure that my outlet, my drop outlet here is lined up, and I'm going to be making that cut there because I want one piece of the gutter coming from the left and one coming from the right. So there needs to be a good sized gap about right here. So we'll kind of make that cut about right there, and another one about right there. Okay, we'll slide that out of the way so I can make my cuts. And again, with my trusty Dremel tool, and I've got a cutoff wheel on it. Again, I'll put links down below for everything in the description, so check that out if you are interested. And you might need a couple cutoff wheels depending on the quality. I had some cheap ones on. They worked fine, but I went through a couple of them. And you can see they're not perfect cuts, but I don't care. I just need water to go there. I'm not connecting anything to the end of them, so that's going to work very well for me. So that's kind of what we're dealing with. We'll get everything back out into the grass, and we've got our now cut remainder of our gutter, and we can slide that in. You can certainly clip it, but I recommend sliding it if you can. It's going to be a little better for you. Otherwise you're wrestling and bending it down in order to get that outside clip in, if that makes sense. So I found it was much easier to slide the gutter laterally into each bracket at a time. Okay, and you can see I'm pushing it all the way down there, and I'm going to be sealing this piece to the coupler to the left here. Right now I'm dry fitting to make sure everything is lining up really well, and I'm especially concerned about this piece to make sure that lines up, because I want the downspout to drop exactly center with that porch beam right below it, if that makes sense. So that is what I'm doing here. And I've got one hand, and I'm about, well, I don't know how high I am, but pretty uncomfortably high. So bear with me here. I've got the camera, and I'm reaching over with my left hand. Probably not the safest maneuver, if I have to admit, but hey, turned out okay. All right, and notice I have the slope on that very left small piece going down into that drop outlet as well. Probably a little too much slope, actually, if I had to self-critique here. Now, once I'm content with things, I can go ahead and drill in. There's a couple of pre-drilled holes in the drop outlet here. So we are going to pre-drill through the metal first. Of course, I marked exactly where I need to drill, and then I can go ahead and finish this up. And check out that long drill bit I have. I recommend you get a couple couplers for the drill bit so it's a little longer and more flexible. And I recommend a magnetic one because you inevitably will drop a screw and curse yourself as you have to go down the ladder to retrieve it. Okay, so we've got our brackets in. Go ahead and make sure the gutters are secured in. See what I mean about that? This is how you clip it in. You have to bend it down and then it'll clip. Works better with two hands, or you can slide it into the bracket, into the hanger like this. So I recommend that when you can do the slide mechanism as opposed to the clip. There we go. And we'll put an end cap on that piece a little later here. So yeah, there we go. We'll get that end cap just dry fit on there. Make sure I'm happy with it. Make sure there's enough clearance. In other words, it's not hitting the side of the house or anything in an awkward way. Okay. And if you were off on any of your measurements, you might have to take your gutter piece back and trim it down a little bit more. So err on the side of caution, trim less versus more. So if you do measure, you can bring it back down to your shop and shorten the gutter a little bit without having to buy, because you can't add more to it. Now this is our drop piece. We're going to just basically drop this down. Now, how are you going to connect these together? Right on, it kind of looks like, well, kind of slides right out. So let me show you. You'll need a piece of downspout to cut and basically slip over those thinner parts on both pieces. And that will act as the coupler to join these two pieces together. So it's about an inch, inch and a quarter, inch and a half, something like that. And we're going to take it to the miter saw and we'll cut off a little piece of the downspout itself. And we'll slide it up there. It's super snug. And you can use, I think, cement the seamer sealant stuff here so that there's no leaks out of these corners. I'm not going to do that. If there is a leak, I will come back up here and secure those pieces together. But basically, once we get that 45 degree in, we'll get a longer piece of downspout, make the cut, and basically just attach it like this. It's pretty straightforward. You want to account for the inch and a half that goes up into that coupler piece. So it kind of looks like that. So basically 245 degree pieces will make that turn quite well. And then it lines up all the way to the beam. And from there, it's easy straight. You pretty much cut the downspout here to length if need be. In this case, I've got a full piece. I think it's another 10-foot piece or so. And I'm going to secure that on there. And then you take the brackets. There's 3 of them. And if that piece comes off, you might want to consider putting some cement or some sealant or some screws to just temporarily hold those in place. Seal them up if you're going to take those screws out, because you don't want there to be holes, obviously. And we'll put that bracket on. Get some wood screws, exterior deck screws, to secure those brackets to the beam. And you can see we're pretty much lined up extremely centered on that beam. So I was pretty happy with my progress. Make sure those are straight. And don't over tighten any of these, by the way. These vinyl plastic pieces can crack if you over tighten those screws. And with our vertical downspout piece attached to the beam, we're going to add this final piece. Now you could drop this all the way to the ground if you have a coupler, but in my case I'm going to DIY style it. I do need to put a brace, little backing here. You can see there's some uneven. The beam kind of goes in about a half to 3/4 of an inch or so. So I'm going to build it out just a little bit so there's no play. I want it to be nice and secure. Got a piece of scrap wood here, and I will stain that the same color stain as the beam, as opposed to white. I thought it would look a little more intentional if it's that. Now this goes on red, the stain itself, but it darkens up to a nice dark walnut over a few days or so. And I'll screw that into the beam and then screw the bracket onto the backer, the spacer, and that should work out just fine. And then I'm going to put this little other piece of wood into my garden to act kind of as a brace here. So that's kind of what it looks like. Again, I could have chosen to drop that all the way down to the ground and avoided those that little wood peg. But anyway, the final step here, we'll go ahead and seal up. You can see we've got that sealant on both end caps. I'm really happy with my measurements, and those can go ahead and be permanently installed now. And I'm putting it on quite liberally. And at this point I will go ahead and permanently secure that right gutter piece to the coupler. If you remember, we had two long sections of the gutter. So there's a coupler there. We already did the left one, the left gutter to the coupler. So now it's a matter of sealing up the right one. And a nice bead like that ought to do the trick. And I don't want that to dry with that ridge, all that stuff squished out. So I'm going to take my finger and just kind of run that down and smooth it out so that water, when it exits and flows, it's not encumbered by anything. That should dry pretty nicely. And that is kind of what we're looking at here. We've got enough slope. Things are aligned and secured. And it rained a little bit more. We got some water coming out, so I'm pretty happy with that. There it is, finished product. See, it looks pretty nice, right? DIY style for an affordable price. So we'll go ahead and stop the video there. Hit that like button if this helped you out, and subscribe to the channel for more do-it-yourself solutions. Thanks.